everyone. Hey everyone, hey everyone, hey everyone. Hey everybody. Hello and welcome to another week of Youth Online. Really glad you could join us today for this week's episode. I hope you've had an amazing week. Hope you've had a good bit of time off if that's what you've been having. This week we are looking at an idea of stopping stuff. Specifically we're looking at the topic of fasting. Now again, this is something you should probably hold back on some of those preconceptions for a moment, because I know that if I say fasting, you're like, Sean, why are you trying to stop me eating chocolate? That's not the point. It's a bit bigger than that. So what we're going to do, as always, we're going to have a song of worship together, and then we're going to go into the talk. So see you on the other side.
Here we stand on this foundation, hope as an anchor, faith is our flag, the cross is our courage, your word is our way. Through wars and rumors of wars, still you are sovereign, still you are Lord. Above the confusion, your covenant stands. For you have not for a moment, abandoned your promise to save, and you will not for a moment, withdraw your He's ever almighty to save. Yes, our God is ever almighty. He's ever almighty always. Here and now, stone upon stone, the house you are building, the kingdom your own, your kingdom unshaken. Church is alive. Now as one, with hearts aflame, all our devotion to your great name, exalted forever. Lord Jesus, you reign. And we will not for a moment forget your promise to save, and we will not for a moment withhold your grace. Our God is ever almighty, He's ever almighty to save. Yes, our God is ever almighty, ever almighty always. mighty to save. Yes, our God is ever almighty. He's ever almighty always.
I obviously am not the sort of person who needs to go on a fast or a diet of any sort, apart from a diet that is high in protein to make me eat more. But fasting is something that is found in the Bible. I'm going to ask, first of all, what it is. So if I were to say fasting to you, I reckon most of you would think it's about giving up food. It's about stuff like Lent, where people give up chocolate or sweets or crisps or something they think should do without because it's unhealthy. And that's kind of what our society has begun to think fasting is. It's giving something up because it's unhealthy. But in the Bible, it was something a little bit different. There are lots of mentions of fasting in the Bible, but I'll pick up one, and it's to do with Paul, or Saul. Now, you might know this story. Saul was someone who really hated the early Christians and spent a lot of his time getting them lynched, putting them in prison, killing them. And one day he was on a road to another city, and he had an encounter with God. He happened to lose his sight for a couple of days, but also during that time, when he first met with God, he fasted. He gave up food and drink for 3 whole days. Now, the scientist in me goes, hang on, but you can only survive 3 days without water. So that must have been kind of the limit as far as he could go. But to me, that sounds really, really unhealthy. And in a world where kind of growing up for you guys is full of kind of eating disorders are a huge thing, and the thought of encouraging someone to not eat kind of to me sounds on the surface to be really quite dangerous. So I want to introduce this to you as something that's not outdated, that's not weird, that's not something that we should ignore, but as something that might actually help with our relationship with God. But it also might not involve food. So there are kind of 3 elements to why fasting is good. First of all, it's about putting a filter on. Now, when you open up Instagram or Snapchat and you use a filter, it changes your appearance from giving your skin a lovely glow or to putting on bunny ears or other things. And putting a filter on your life is part of changing perspective. It's part of making things look a little bit different. But on the other side of things, filtering also gets rid of things. So filtering might, again, in an app filter, get rid of an imperfection, get rid of your background. If you have coffee, a coffee filter filters out the lumps of coffee and you get a nice coffee out the other side. So filtering might be about removing something that is no longer wanted or is unhealthy. If you had a coffee without the filter in the filter thing, you'd end up with a kind of a filter with coffee with bits in it, and it wouldn't be very nice. It wouldn't be very tasty, and it would feel weird to drink. Same applies to anything you filter. If you forget the filter, it's not going to be very nice. So maybe fasting for you might be filtering something out of your life. Maybe you have an unhealthy obsession with something. It might be Harry Styles. It might be Harry Potter fan fiction. It could be anything in between. Clara's laughing, so I think I've hit the nail on the head with that one. But we all have these little things that we're into, and we think, hey, okay, now that I think about it, maybe I have an unhealthy relationship with that. Maybe I spend way too much time on it. Maybe I'm too invested in it. It could be on the other side. You could be super regular at the gym, or you could be driving yourself way too hard in sports that it's getting in the way. The filter can help you take a break, can help you change a behavior or action that perhaps might be drawing you away from God, but you haven't realized it. So filter, you remove something that gets in the way. And fasting is part of a command as well. And this is a small quote from Joel, another mention of fasting. Blow the ram's horn in Jerusalem as you do, but announce a time of fasting. So this is the beginning. For them, it was starting something, putting a filter on and starting something new. So after the filter, we get focus. So once you build space, it's about shifting what you look at. Now, thinking back to the food thing, I wonder if you can remember a time when you were really hungry and what hunger makes you do. Now, often it results in anger. So being hangry with other people is very common. If you go shopping, especially in like Tesco or something, when you're hungry, you make irrational decisions about what food you buy. Suddenly the individual pastry is not enough and the 4-pack is what you need. And so you kind of end up with something that you don't want. And I made a note here that when I was last really hungry, I have kind of 2 phones because of my job, and I spent a good 5 minutes trying to get my iPhone charger to fit into my Android phone. And it just wasn't going to work. It was never going to work. But because of my hunger, I just couldn't focus. And the idea of losing something, of filtering something out, allows us to shift our focus elsewhere. Perhaps that is a focus on God, but it might be something more practical. It might be a focus on an individual. It might be a focus on friends. It might be a focus on family. But importantly, it stops you from being a focus on yourself. So by filtering something out that is for you, the focus shifts away from yourself. You end up with more time. Jesus talks a lot about this, and he specifically talks about fasting, about giving something up, because what people used to do is they would tell the whole world that they were fasting, that they'd given something up and they were trying to be really close to God by giving up food. And Jesus said, actually, that's a really hypocritical thing to do, because by announcing to everyone and showing off that you're fasting, the attention is obviously not about God. The attention is obviously on yourself. And it makes you doubt the reason why someone is doing it. And Jesus says that it's God who sees everything who will reward you when you spend time trying to get closer. And the result of all this, the filter and the focus, leads you to fullness. So obviously, if you think about it in food terms, if you have a time away from food and then you eat food, you get full. It's really good. It's really good having a meal after where you're really, really hungry and it feels you can eat anything. Once you've focused on something, so you've got the filter, you remove some things, you shift your focus to God, you've then got a space where God can fill you. But if you don't create that space, perhaps you're not leaving any room for God. I've written here, try being empty so that you can be full. Pope Francis of the Catholic Church says this about fasting. It's a summons to stop, to focus on what is essential, to fast from the unnecessary things that distract us. It's a wake-up call for the soul. That's a pretty powerful word there. To describe something as a wake-up call for the soul makes me go, maybe there is something in it. So maybe in your lives you might want to fast from, if there's nothing you can think about giving up or releasing, then maybe actually you could do it with food. Try missing just one small meal at a time when you know you're close to food and can get access to food if you need it, and see what hunger drives you to do without taking it out on other people and without filling yourself up with food. See if creating an emptiness leads you to God if you focus on it. But otherwise, try skipping something else and using the space to focus on God and allow God to fill you. And I believe it's through that fullness that is how we discover what God has in store for us. Like we've talked about studying, we talked about prayer and meditation, and therefore fitting in with all this, fasting is a really spiritual thing. It's really deep. By giving up something in order to focus on God, we're kind of telling God where our priorities are, even though we know that lots of the time we don't get it right.
So I really hope that's enough to kind of get your appetite going on what this might mean for you, and also start to figure out how you might fit it into your life. The other spiritual disciplines, the ways of reconnecting that we've looked at over the last couple of weeks, like Bible study, like meditation, like prayer, are all things that can help fill the gap left by fasting. Fasting or refraining from things is our tool of freeing up some space to allow us to refocus on God. So I've got a couple of questions so that you can go through by yourself, as well as a Bible passage for you to read as we look at Jesus in the wilderness and how he went without food for 40 days and how he was tempted, but also how he went with the Holy Spirit into that and out of that experience. Don't forget to keep an eye on our Instagram for our midweek moment, where we'll be giving you another way you can use this idea of fasting to reconnect with God. And we've also got our in-person services that are taking place at St George's every Sunday. They're really short, about 50 minutes long. And the great one for you to come to might be the 6:30 p.m. service. All you have to do is book online, and there's a link in the description of this video. So that's it. Don't forget to stay connected and be in touch if you've got any questions. But other than that, we'll see you next week. Bye.